Aita, work friendships and ex-crush advice. Disclaimer: English is not my first language. I am typing late at night while trying to include as many relevant details as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Summary: the individual I previously joked about as my office crush turned out to be a friend's boyfriend. Neither she nor our mutual friends ever mentioned anything, not even he has a girlfriend. And I feel like the antagonist, yet I also feel betrayed and somewhat used. Our friendship seems to be fading, and I am seeking advice on how to keep our colleagues unaware of this situation while maintaining neutral and professional interactions. I, a 29-year-old female, am somewhat extroverted and enjoy maintaining good relationships with everyone. In the office, I strive to keep interactions brief and pleasant, but I do not shy away when conversations extend, provided I have the time. Since we sometimes experience stressful interactions, such as involving others to resolve issues quickly, I appreciate the chance to have regular discussions during office days, which lighten the work atmosphere. I tend to speak openly with everyone about various topics, and colleagues often confide in me, seeking support or entertainment when they are more reserved. I also love to cook and bake, so I enjoy bringing my homemade treats to our coffee breaks, knowing they will be appreciated in the office. About 6 months after I joined the company, 2 women joined the team I worked with prior to transitioning to a different one. Let's refer to them as K and Z. I assisted them a bit in settling in, as did the rest of the team. They were quite close, having known each other well before coming to Germany from their home country due to a serious ongoing issue. I liked them both but took some time to approach them, sensing they needed some calm moments to adjust to their new reality. It was evident to me that K was more open to me, while Z was more reserved and kept her distance. Regardless, I valued both of them and even wished to learn their language to make them feel more welcomed, since they would often communicate in their language, a common occurrence in our multinational office, and I enjoy learning new languages. At the beginning of last year, a man joined another team within the shared office space of our company. I used to joke that he was my work crush and would mention him when he was in the office, but nothing ever materialized between us. It was primarily to entertain my co-workers, particularly since I was not looking for a relationship at that time. We hardly communicated, and I did not even know his name initially because our teams did not collaborate. I found him attractive and interesting and thought he would glance at me longer than usual when we crossed paths, but that was the extent of it. He was always with his team while I was with mine. For simplicity, let's refer to him as G. A couple of months after G started, another colleague from the same country as K and Z joined to manage our office facilities. We'll call her L. Naturally, they bonded right away and became close friends. L quickly became close to me as well, and we frequently met during our time in the office for coffee or to discuss ways to make our workdays more pleasant. I held her friendship in high regard and considered it one of the best aspects of my office experience. I would venture to say that she and K were closer to me than Z, despite knowing Z longer. When making jokes about my office crush, I always mentioned that I did not know his name, whether he was single or his preferences. Those sorts of comments. Then one day, I actually learned his name, and their reaction made me feel that something was amiss. I chose not to address it at the time, as we were at a bachelorette party for one of the girls, and I thought I had already brought up enough unusual topics, so I changed the subject and moved on. A few days later, while conversing with other co-workers, one of the girls revealed that G was actually a manager specializing in working with millennials. I approached him since I was concerned about 2 colleagues who mentioned they were leaving due to burnout, figuring he might be the person to assist us. Spoiler: he wasn't, as it turned out that was unrelated to his role. Nevertheless, he was always polite and considerate, and although warmer in person than over messages, our exchanges remained professional and courteous. We spoke maybe 3 times in the office and exchanged a few messages online, nothing more than I would with any other colleague, and none of it was unprofessional. Another strange aspect I noted was that at least one of the girls seemed to check on us during our exchanges in the office and would later ask what we discussed. I was always open with them, but I found it odd that they would seemingly keep tabs on our conversations. However, they never mentioned anything like, "We know he has a girlfriend." I took their curiosity as support for my harmless antics and continued updating them, dismissing their odd reactions as simply due to being busy at work. To keep the story succinct, after several incidents in the office, I gradually pieced together that G and L were at least involved romantically. Initially, I was quite upset about being unaware and unintentionally crossing boundaries with my comments. I noticed L seemed distant in the last few months, even though I made efforts to communicate with her, believing she attributed her distance to work stress. I thought I was simply amusing them with my lighthearted remarks, but once I noticed the situation, I believed I had exacerbated it. I confided in Kay superficially about my feelings of guilt, and she reassured me that in their culture, such comments are not a concern, so I shouldn't worry. I considered reaching out to L but ultimately decided against it, wishing to avoid making matters worse and respecting her apparent desire for distance, despite feeling like a poor friend. Thus, the antagonist aspect that prompts my inquiry. However, after a few days, I began to feel frustrated that they never alerted me to the truth of the situation. They made remarks in their language that I couldn't fully grasp, but no one addressed the situation with me directly. While I respect L and Gita's wish for privacy in their relationship, I believe that if they truly valued our friendship, they would have casually mentioned, "Hey, we know he has a girlfriend," to save me from continuing to make amusing comments, or at least suggested I change the topic. If the roles were reversed, I would likely have told her, "Yes, he's cute, that's why we're dating," and we would have laughed about it, possibly maintaining our camaraderie. It was never that serious, and I would not choose a man I barely knew over a friend I had known for nearly a year. Now, I am left feeling unsettled regarding their actions. I attempted to maintain a friendly yet professional demeanor, but with this knowledge weighing on my mind, I became increasingly aware of Eltike's comments toward me lately, which often questioned why I was bringing treats to the office or suggested I avoid shared areas with other teams and remain in my workspace. Additionally, she would make remarks that seemed to disparage things G liked that I did not care for. This development strikes me as particularly peculiar. Kay would sometimes invite me to sit with her in a separate room, which I appreciated and assumed she did as well, but then make veiled comments implying it was to avoid encountering G. I felt foolish for trusting them and for being open about my feelings. I acknowledge that I should have treated work colleagues as friends with more caution, but I genuinely cared about these women, and they were a significant part of my enjoyment of working in the office. Now, I feel foolish for having trusted them and somewhat violated, as I perceive that, instead of sharing laughter together, I was the subject of their joke for being honest with them. It feels as though I was part of a fidelity test or some sort of evaluation. Even if their silence was meant to protect my feelings, I cannot grasp how this would make sense in the long run. After reflecting on this, I exited the WhatsApp group we had without explanation and deleted their contacts. When we pass by each other in the office, I do not look their way, only greeting them if they acknowledge me first. This behavior seems very juvenile, but I honestly do not wish to be the one to initiate communication and resolve this situation. Trust is gone between us, and I doubt a conversation would improve anything. Just to clarify that I have not entirely put this out of my mind, a couple of days after connecting the dots, during our final conversation, G brought up his girlfriend casually and how they spent New Year's Eve together. Kay also mentioned that she, Z, and L were together during the holiday season, suggesting that Kay and Z were aware of the situation as well. They were also present together at our company party, confirming my instincts. Now, the relevant issues involve other coworkers and future relationships. I believe no one is aware of this situation, or at least they haven't said anything. I have simply stopped making jokes about Gita's presence in the office, and we manage to discuss other topics when he is around. I would feel incredibly embarrassed if anyone heard about what transpired. Is distancing from them the best course of action? I am uncertain how to interact with Elle moving forward. She is our office manager, and we need to ask her for assistance with various tasks at work. Currently, I am having colleagues communicate with her on my behalf, but at some point, I may have to deal with her directly. Should I be straightforward and professional, risking coming across as rude, or should I adopt a friendly demeanor, knowing it is merely for appearances? G collaborates with several coworkers I like, and since we share office days, I have found myself in some awkward situations while trying to avoid him. There was even a humorous moment when I abruptly left the office after he unexpectedly greeted me while I was conversing with others. I may need to navigate this situation better. In a group context, would it be acceptable to say hello? Should I ignore him until he perceives that he should not engage with me? Or should I maintain normal interactions in group settings and disregard him when we are alone? I genuinely do not know what the best approach is. I recently discovered that Kay is pregnant. This news has affected my sleep, prompting me to write this. While I am happy for her, I am saddened by the realization that I cannot trust her anymore. I intend to contribute towards her team's pregnancy gift, but will refrain from signing the card. Still, it has deeply upset me. Should I congratulate her, or is it better to maintain silence? Please be honest, am I the antagonist in this situation? I feel conflicted about it, to be honest. I welcome all advice, as I seem to have exhausted the options available to me. Thank you for your time and response. Story 2. Aita for not enjoying every part of my paid for Hawaii trip. Hello, I am composing this from home 2 days after returning from a vacation in Kauai. I, a 20-year-old male, was invited to join my friend, who is a 49-year-old male, on his 50th birthday trip to Hawaii. Let's refer to him as Dave. I met him a little over a year ago. We began as friends with benefits, but now we are simply quite close friends. Dave is employed in the technology sector and earns a substantial income from it. I'm a full-time college student who does not have a surplus of funds. In October 2024, Dave invited me to accompany him and his 2 partners, aged 35 and 50, on a President's Day weekend trip to Kauai. I was to stay until Tuesday due to my work and school commitments, while he and his partners planned to visit the Big Island for another week. In November, he sent me first-class tickets to and from Hawaii and mentioned that they would also cover the hotel expenses. This was my first experience with a significant trip like this, but for my friends, this was a common occurrence. They mentioned they usually travel to Hawaii twice a year. We arrived very late on Friday night, drove to the hotel, dropped off our belongings, and the 3 of them went to a grocery store across the street to gather supplies. I decided to go to bed. Saturday arrived, and I woke up much earlier than the 3 of them. I got ready by 7 a.m., crossed the street for coffee, and returned to the hotel to relax by the pool and enjoy the beach view. I realized I did not have our room code, so I texted them for it. They got up around 11:30 a.m., and our morning began with picking up their friend who lives on the island and visiting a local farmer's market. We had some delicious food and gathered a lot of items, and their friend was a pleasure to be with. We returned to the hotel around 1 p.m. and spent the next couple of hours at the pool and beach, and I was having an incredible time. Before the trip, Dave had told me about a ukulele player who performs at the hotel's oceanfront restaurant every Wednesday. He mentioned it was one of his favorite activities and that he was disappointed I wouldn't be able to see him since I was leaving the day before. As fate would have it, the Saturday we were there coincided with the restaurant's 15th anniversary, and the ukulele player would perform that day instead of his usual Wednesday slot. We were all thrilled that we would finally get to see him. At 4 p.m., we were able to sit at the bar of the fully booked restaurant, which offered a fantastic ocean view. The restaurant was quite pricey, so we opted not to order any entrees, only drinks. I had a Shirley Temple, while my 3 companions each had 2 drinks. The bar stools were very uncomfortable, and after half an hour, I found it challenging to stay seated. Unfortunately, I had no phone reception or Wi-Fi, so I was completely engaged in my surroundings. When the ukulele performer came out, it was a charming experience. The view was magnificent, he had a lovely voice, and he was quite skilled on the ukulele. The performance lasted 2 hours, during which he primarily played song requests. After the first hour, I struggled to maintain a happy expression. I was sitting uncomfortably, feeling hungry, sober, and without my phone for additional distraction. I felt and looked bored, but I appreciated the performer and was grateful to experience it. After the show, I mentioned to one of his partners that the performance had lasted longer than I expected, and he agreed. I told them all that I enjoyed it, and we headed to a different restaurant they liked for food. On Sunday, we explored more of the island, and it turned out to be my favorite day there. I had a fantastic time, and it was evident. Monday was another wonderful day of exploration and meeting more friends on the island. We had mistakenly mixed up the dates of my departure and believed I was supposed to leave on Monday night instead of Tuesday night. It wasn't until around 9 or 10 p.m., after I had packed and dressed for the airport, that we realized the mistake and that I would be staying an extra day. At that moment, I was mentally exhausted and shocked by the realization that I would be there for an additional day than planned. Consequently, my expression reflected confusion rather than joy. Dave then promptly asked what I wanted to do the following day. I replied that I had already experienced everything I had wished for during this trip and was satisfied with what we had done. I mentioned that I would like to relax by the pool for my final day there. It seemed that the three of them understood my perspective, particularly since I knew they had individual plans for that day as well. I went to bed, likely falling asleep by 10:30 p.m. The following morning, I woke up at 9 a.m. to find a text message from Dave sent at midnight. It read, "This is my 50th birthday trip. I asked what you wanted to do tomorrow, and you said you just wanted to stay at the hotel. I texted about this with Stan and Mark, and they said, 'Wait, it's your birthday.' You have behaved poorly on this trip. I've tried to be understanding, because I know you've never traveled and felt overwhelmed. But honestly, you have been incredibly entitled and selfish, ruining my birthday. If you cannot sit through a 2-hour ukulele concert without becoming bored and losing your composure over the lack of internet access, you need to work on some serious personal growth. The unfortunate part is that I was genuinely trying to make this trip enjoyable for you. This island holds significant meaning for me, and I was eager to share it with you. I feel entirely undervalued and disrespected. You have truly hurt my feelings, and I sincerely regret trying to share this special place with you. Stan and Mark are the two friends' dogs sitting for the three of us back home. I was taken aback that he would send such a message, feeling blindsided. Dave sent this text while I was sleeping just 30 feet away from him in the same hotel room. I could not comprehend why he chose to communicate this via text rather than face-to-face. I immediately texted him back at 9 a.m., inquiring if he was awake and if we could discuss this matter. I did not receive a response until 10:15 a.m., when he confirmed he was awake. I decided not to confront him until both of his partners were also awake. One of his partners came by my room to say good morning and asked how I was doing. I began tearing up and showed him the text message. He clearly hadn't been aware of the situation and did not expect that I had received such a message. After leaving my room, he texted me neither. I thought we were all having a good time. It didn't seem to me that you were being ungrateful. I also thought you enjoyed the concert. Once I learned that the last person was awake, I entered the hotel living room, where all three of them were gathered, and expressed my feelings. I explained how much I had relished this trip and how special it was for me. I emphasized that opportunities like this do not come often for people like me, and I believed I had shown my gratitude. I recounted our various activities together and reiterated to all three of them how much fun I had. I conveyed to Dave how hurt I felt that he chose to send me the message instead of discussing it directly with me. I apologized for anything I may have done that came across as ungrateful or that could have ruined any experience. Dave was somewhat quiet in his responses. He mentioned he was hurt that I appeared uninterested during the ukulele performance, and that after learning I would be staying an additional day, I didn't look happy. I apologized again and attempted to clarify that I was genuinely enjoying myself, even if I did not always display my emotions outwardly. I pointed out that I had expressed my happiness to each of them multiple times throughout the trip, and his two partners affirmed that they did not perceive me as ungrateful. Our conversation concluded with a hug while I was still crying. Dave did not offer any apology for his text, and that topic remained untouched for the rest of the day. The remainder of the day was enjoyable. We had breakfast together, after which they departed for their individual plans for the afternoon. I spent my time at the pool, mostly alone. I put on a cheerful demeanor, and we all gathered later to watch the sunset at a beach far from the hotel, which was truly beautiful. As night fell, we had dinner, and I packed my belongings before we drove to the airport for my departure. During the ride, Dave asked if I was nervous about the flight. I admitted I felt somewhat anxious, but that I had mentally checked out because my feelings were still raw and hurt from that morning. One of his partners acknowledged that was valid and suggested we revisit this conversation when they returned from the rest of their trip. Dave remained silent for the remainder of the car ride. At the airport, Dave's two partners gave me a warm hug goodbye and thanked me for joining them. Dave offered me a brief and weak hug, contrasting sharply with the way he usually embraces people. After they left, I proceeded to my gate to await boarding. While waiting, I texted the partner who had suggested we discuss things later, mentioning that Dave had given me a lackluster hug and it felt as though he didn't want to see me again. His partner replied that Dave had been struggling even before the trip commenced and that it appeared I had become the outlet for those feelings. I thanked him for having me and shared that I had a wonderful time together. He explained that he did not think I had done anything wrong and that he had attempted to assure Dave of that the night before, but the situation escalated and felt as if he was turning against him. We said our goodbyes and agreed to talk again later. I returned home on Wednesday morning and shared the story of my trip, both the highs and the lows, with friends and family. Later that afternoon, Dave texted me to ask how my flight was. I responded that it was good but communicated that we should wait to talk in person, indicating that this matter was unresolved and that I needed some time. He acknowledged my request and said he would respect it. I wished him a happy birthday and left it at that. Today, he sent me a message about a chaotic experience he had while renting a car. I am choosing not to respond. It seems he wishes to move past what occurred, but I feel that I should not have to forget it, especially since it appears he is avoiding discussing it. I am uncertain about what to do next. Regardless of whether we reconcile or not, I am feeling the need to distance myself from him at this point. I believe what he said was inappropriate and that the manner in which he expressed it was immature. He must take responsibility for his words and apologize to me as well. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Story 3. Aita came completely confused. Can someone explain her weird behavior? Hello everyone. I find myself in a rather strange predicament and am uncertain about how to respond or what emotions to embrace. I hope you can assist me. My actions may seem foolish, but I feel as though I've been trapped in an emotional prison where my thoughts no longer felt rational. The story: I am a 22-year-old male who met a 21-year-old girl online last year in late April. It was a completely random encounter, not through a dating application. She hailed from another country, and initially we communicated for hours each day. I must admit, it was a wonderful experience. I had rarely felt such a deep connection with another person. Our views aligned perfectly, we shared similar likes and dislikes, and our humor was compatible. It felt almost unreal, like a fairy tale. There were even instances when we typed the same messages simultaneously. She affectionately referred to me as her twin or platonic soulmate. After a month, it became apparent that she would begin studying medicine in my home country in September, and suddenly, the prospect of meeting her became a tangible possibility. We both felt excitement that this could actually materialize. Up until that point, everything seemed to be going well. However, that's when the odd occurrences began. After approximately a month and a half, she suddenly stopped responding to my messages without warning. It left me feeling extremely insecure, and after about 4 to 5 days without communication, I expressed my sadness over how things had ended without any explanation from her. She replied almost immediately, explaining that a family member had passed away and she had not spoken to anyone for several days. I understood this and felt genuine sympathy for her. I decided to give her some space. Following that, our communication resumed, and we actually grew emotionally closer. She began to say things like, "Why aren't there any guys like you where I live?" and mentioned having dreams about us meeting. By the end of August, she created a thoughtful long-distance gift for my birthday and started expressing feelings like, "I love you." However, just a few days later, and only weeks before her arrival in my country, she unexpectedly announced that she was going on a date with a very attractive guy and was quite excited about it. This devastated me and made me feel incredibly nauseated. Additionally, it didn't make sense, as she was leaving the country so soon. Afterward, I confided in a friend, a 22-year-old female, about my feelings for her and sought advice. She suggested I take an all-or-nothing approach, so I did. A few days later, I confessed my feelings to her. I hadn't intended to do this before meeting in person, but I felt compelled to share. This completely surprised her. She described me as strange since we had never met, jokingly called me a flirty guy, and suggested cutting off all communication. I told her I understood, and we ceased communication immediately. A week later, she reconnected, claiming she might have feelings for me as well, mentioned she had dreamt about me again, and felt terrible about what transpired. I proposed we discuss it more thoroughly, but she declined, stating she only wrote that to ease her own conscience. Unsure of how to respond, I remained silent. While gaming with friends, I checked the chat at midnight only to find I had been blocked. Following that, there was a period of 2 months without contact. Though it was challenging to move on from her, I managed to find inner peace. My friend suggested that her behavior had been narcissistic from the start and advised that I should block her for my own well-being. I chose not to follow that advice, but as fate would have it, something else occurred. At the start of November, I received a friend request from her, which made my heart race. All the feelings flooded back at once. I accepted her request. She expressed remorse for her past behavior. I mentioned my dissatisfaction regarding her decision to block me without warning, but stated I could forgive her. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we exchanged messages sporadically. By then, she had started her medical studies, so her availability was limited, but we conversed a couple of times each week. She was quite chatty and noticed that I was somewhat more reserved and cold, understandably due to her prior actions. It felt as if she became somewhat fixated on our conversations. Whenever I initiated chats, she would respond almost instantly. Then, out of the blue, she admitted that she had feelings for me and regretted her previous behavior. I still had feelings for her, so I reciprocated. We made a commitment to one another. For that day and the following ones, she was very affectionate. However, as time went on, her responses decreased, likely due to the demands of her medical program, which is understandable given the stress. We ended up chatting only once or twice a week until she returned to her home country for the Christmas holiday. Her replies became delayed, sometimes taking several hours or even a full day. Upon her return home, she became quite conversational during the Christmas period. She was very loving toward me, and our connection felt strong. So, what transpired next? Shortly after Christmas, she abruptly began ignoring me again in the middle of our conversation. I posed a question, and she did not respond for several days. Once again, there was no warning. When I sent a follow-up message, she replied that she was frustrated we primarily communicated through text and that we should speak more often. Because of that, she felt no urgency to reply. I understood this perspective, and I suggested we increase our communication. In the following 2 months, as she resumed her studies, things appeared to go well once more. We interacted about once or twice a week, and during those times, she was quite affectionate. I value open communication, so I expressed that her sudden disappearances led me to feel insecure and unsafe, and asked that if there was an issue, she let me know. She reassured me that I had nothing to worry about, and even mentioned turning down another guy because she wanted to be with me. And yes, just guess what happened. A week later, she ghosted me once again. It has now been 2 weeks without any communication. On a side note, some peculiarities. She was very displeased when I mentioned that I had shared information about her with someone. She preferred to keep our relationship private so that it wouldn't be tainted by outside opinions. Additionally, she was hesitant to set a firm date for when we would meet. There was something unsettling about the entire situation. You might say it was evident she wasn't genuinely interested in me. Yet, when we conversed, she demonstrated affection and care for me. It was as if she loved me simultaneously while wanting to keep her distance. A push and pull dynamic created a very disorienting feeling. That's all for now. Is there anyone who can help explain this behavior? I am unsure of what was genuine and what was not. How can someone be so affectionate one day and then vanish the next? Is this indeed narcissistic behavior, as my friend suggested, or could it be indicative of an avoidant attachment style? Should I ignore her completely, send a final message, block her altogether? Remarkably, I was always anxious about her potentially ignoring me once more, but now that it has happened, I strangely feel a sense of relief. Before you inquire, no, I did not resort to trying to force anything, nor did I bombard her with messages constantly. As I indicated, I often waited days for her responses and consistently granted her space. I realize I was caught in a toxic cycle of insecurity, when I should have exited myself. Reflecting on my messages, my actions may have appeared rather foolish. However, I believe my feelings for her ran deep, and the summer when we communicated for hours each day may have led me to develop a distorted perception of her. I still require time to move on from her. Thank you for any insights you may have.